Welcome to the Business and Beyond podcast. Thank you for listening to this week's mid-roll show.
This week, Tyler sits down with Jessica Bowers, owner of Waypoint Behavioral Health Solutions. They talk about the culture in her company and being a woman in today's business climate. Enjoy, and thanks for listening.
I'm Tyler from the Business and Beyond podcast. This is going to be our midweek roll. I'm here with Jessica. Jessica, how are you doing?
Hi there, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get this thing started. Normally, like I was saying before, we do this with whiskey, TX whiskey, and we don't have any TX whiskey, so Tony, Ashton, we're sorry. But we do have wine.
We got some wine.
And we do have some girl beer, seltzer, because I don't like beer. But to each their own, that's fine, totally fine. So let's go ahead and get this thing rolling. I have a couple of questions that I'm going to ask Jessica, and she's going to be answering them for us. So let's get this started with, tell us about yourself as a person and then as a professional.
So I'm the owner and founder of Waypoint Behavioral Health Solutions. What we do is we provide intensive behavioral support for children with autism. We do that both in-home and in a clinic. The science that we follow is ABA, or Applied Behavior Analysis. So that's a little bit about our company and what we do. Our company is about 4 years old. We've been doing this since May of 2015, and it's a company that I started and founded, and I'm excited to be growing still. Personally, I'm 42 years old, and I have 4 children. They're all boys. They're ages 20 to 11. I am a serial entrepreneur, so this is the third business that I have owned. Kind of as a person, when people ask me about hobbies, I'm like, oh, that's such an awkward question, because when I want to answer about hobbies, I'm that geek who's like, I love my job. I love doing what I do for my job, and that's my hobbies. I want to study about ABA, and I want to make manipulatives, and I want to hang out with kids, and those are the things that I enjoy doing. I really could consider that my hobby. But if I had to list like real hobbies, I would say I like to read, I like to write. I'm working on a novel right now. It's a very slow process, but I'm working my way through it. And then I just enjoy things that are active, hiking and biking and kayaking. I'm a big hammock fan. I carry a hammock in my car all the time. So I can put one up anywhere. It's kind of my favorite place to be. As a professional, I'd say I'm driven. I'm pretty optimistic. I'm very people-focused. I think I'm exceptionally patient. I would call myself a patient person pretty much all the time, except I don't like wasting time. That's my biggest pet peeve, is wasting time.
I love it. I'm going to pause this really quick.
Owned.
All right, Jessica, now can you tell us, how did you get into this field?
Well, Waypoint's the third company that I've owned. And I've done that because I've always enjoyed finding an unmet niche in the marketplace and designing a business to meet that need. But Waypoint's the first business that I've owned that met a personal need for me. Like I said, I have 4 kids, and 2 of them have autism diagnoses. So I have been parenting a child with autism for 2 decades. Autism diagnosis and autism services in the last 2 decades has changed quite a lot. So when I was navigating that two decades ago, there were so few resources that were available. In fact, when my son was diagnosed, I looked at his pediatrician and I was like, well, what do I do now? And she was kind of defeated, and she shrugged, and she's like, oh, I don't know, maybe get some play therapy. And so I went away feeling kind of like there wasn't any hope, that I was on my own, that it was definitely something that I needed to find a solution for without a lot of support. And so I wanted to create a business that would meet that need, and that would meet the need that I had for myself and that I needed for my family.
So it's kind of personal to you.
It's very personal to me.
I like that.
So it's definitely something that I'm connected to on a personal level, and that changes the way that we do business just kind of completely. For us, there was a lot of disappointment along the way. Tons of services that really didn't meet my son's needs, and some that did. We were finding our way together as we navigated this diagnosis, but almost every service that we experienced did not meet my needs for support and didn't meet my family's needs for support. So I really wanted to create something that would help families who were in our position to walk through their diagnosis with support.
So I'm assuming there's probably not a ton of companies out there that have, having a child that has autism, and you're actually in this field, and I feel like I'm definitely going to be more leaning towards you guys just because, you're living it, actually, which is incredible.
I do think it makes us unique, and it makes it in some ways easier for us to do our job, because when I sit down with a family, especially if it's a new diagnosis for them and they're navigating just that, to be able to sit across the living room from them and for them to look at me and to know that I've done it and I've navigated it and I've lived through it and I'm thriving with it. It gives them confidence. It gives them a path. And that's, even our name, Waypoint, we chose that because waypoints, are these like spots along the map that sort of help you to know where you are and how to find your way.
I like that.
And that's what we want to do. I've had that experience. I've done it personally. I want to give people the opportunity to find their way and for us to help them do that.
That's awesome. Why did you choose to start your own company instead of working for somebody else?
Again, it's that very personal thing. But aside from wanting to create a company that did things differently, I needed to design a lifestyle for myself and for my family that would allow me the flexibility to care for 4 children and to care for children with special needs. So business ownership is kind of the best way to do that. You're able to...
the freedom.
Yeah,
Sure.
The freedom to design. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to work hard. In fact, when you own a business, you work harder than ever, but you can design your work-life balance. It gives you the opportunity to do that. And then I also wanted to be able to cultivate and shape a company that matched my core values and to be able to do that from the ground up and then do it in a way that I felt like was the best way to do it and I could be proud of.
I like that a whole lot. So what sets you apart from other ABA companies?
So we've talked a little bit about that already. It's that personal connection to our work. And because of that, because I've had that personal connection, I'm driven to excellence. I know that it's not just a name or a number or even a face, that this is someone's child, that it's their most intimate relationship. I know how much it matters to people, the work that we do and the way that we change things for people. And so for that reason, we value quality over quantity. And that's really not kind of the norm for our industry right now, especially for larger companies. I think our size really sets us apart. It allows us to be agile and responsive. It allows us to meet needs on an individual basis rather than apply kind of a cookie cutter approach to people's needs. I also feel like what sets us apart is this concept of being very future focused in our philosophy. When we have a new client start with us, even if it's a little bitty kid, 2 years old, sometimes we have kids as young as 2 or 3 or 4, my immediate question is, where do you see you and your family 10 years from now, 20 years from now? I'm thinking about that child as an adult. And what can we do to make them the most independent, fully functional adult possible? And design programming that's going to allow them to do that. And we start with that. Rather than that being kind of an accidental byproduct of what we do, we start with the idea that we're going to get to the future and we're going to do that the best way possible.
So now getting off topic a little bit here, what is the difference between, maybe not a good way to ask it. So I know I have very limited experience with autistic children, but what's the difference between, I know they have, when you're in school, you have a separate class. You offer something different than what that is, right?
Absolutely. So what we do is one-on-one therapy, and I can kind of give you a little breakdown for autism, and I can give you the very jargony definition, and then I can give you the broken down definition.
Please.
So ABA is the use of evidence-based principles to target socially significant behaviors, to increase or decrease behaviors in a systematic manner. So let me say that in plain English. ABA is science. It uses data to drive decision making for each individual's behavior change. So it's very individualized. It is one-on-one. It is specifically designed for a child, for their needs, for what matters to that family. Definitely not cookie cutter. And then it uses data to track that so that you have a good understanding of what's happening with the behavior, so you can make sure it's moving in the right direction. And then you can finely tune what's happening with the program so that the needs are being met in exactly the way that you want them to be.
So I know this is going to be another off-topic question. It's kind of a hard one, too. Autism, how would you... I know it's really hard to describe it. You're going to be the perfect person to describe it. So just in case people out there listening maybe not have a... You might know what autism is, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that you don't know what autism actually is. Could you just kind of briefly describe that, and then we'll go back to the questions?
Sure, absolutely. So there's 3 sort of deficits that have to occur in order for autism to be diagnosed. And they are social deficits, communication deficits, and perseverative behavior, which is just doing something repeatedly over and over again. So even any 2 of those is not enough to have an autism diagnosis. You have to have deficits in communication, deficits in social skills, and repetitive behaviors. But I really like to think that there's a little more finely tuned definition for autism, and it is that autism is a motivation disorder. So what happens with autism is that the things that are typically motivating for people, which is social interaction and communicating and being with other people, that's not motivating for people with autism. In fact, they don't really like it. And then things that aren't typically motivating for people become motivating for people with autism. So they enjoy flapping their hands, or they get really obsessed with lining things up. So it's this very radical shift in motivation and what matters to a person. And that's why the science of ABA matters and why it's so important, because we understand motivation and learning, and we understand the deficits in motivation, and it's a very different way of teaching because it's a very different way of being motivating.
Okay, very informative. I like that. Our last show was about, our last couple shows actually have been about leadership stuff, so I brought this one to you since you are a small business owner. What are your core values as a leader?
Well, I'm going to cheat just a little bit. Our core values at Waypoint are compassion, creativity, connection, collaboration, capability, and courage. So even though it feels like cheating, I'm going to say that those are my core values as a leader. I value leadership that's person-focused and willing to think outside the box. I really value the opportunity to work with others. I think that everyone that I interact with has something to teach me, and that I have the opportunity to learn from everyone that I meet. It's that value of just collaborating and listening to people, connecting with people matters. To me, I value excellence. I value the pursuit of excellence, which is not the same as perfection. Some people think that that is it, but it's not. It's just getting better all the time rather than being perfect. And then I value determination and just really old-fashioned grit.
I love it. This is what our last episode was actually, or not our last episode, our episode before this was about culture. And I brought this up because it's so important, especially not only as a leader to have good culture, but having people underneath you to have good culture. So the question is, how do you motivate your employees, and how is the culture?
So we just talked about motivation and ABA being the science of motivation. So really, we should be like the best at this. ABA companies should be able to motivate their employees perfectly.
Right.
But motivation is tricky because motivation is individualized. What's motivating for one person is not what's motivating for another. And it's actually kind of easy and a little bit lazy to just say, we're going to do this one-size-fits-all motivating thing for our employees and then just expect it to work. But it doesn't. It usually backfires. People need individualized motivation. So I think the only way to really motivate well is to be constantly checking in with people, see what motivates them, provide that motivation, help them to grow as an employee.
So learning your employees, basically.
Absolutely. And understanding what matters to them, what's valuable to them, and helping them get that. Overall, my goal is to help the employees connect to their work in a way that they are internally motivated. So they're not needing someone externally to motivate them, but they feel internally motivated. Research and science, and we're all about that, tells us that internal motivation is more likely to be sustained. Long term, it's more satisfying to the employee. So kind of in our culture, I hope to create autonomy. I want people to feel autonomous in their work. I want them to feel a sense of competence, that they're good at their work. and I want them to feel that they're valued for the work that they do.
So how do you feel the culture is at Waypoint currently?
I think that we have a great culture, and I think that we're always trying to get better at it.
We were talking about our again, not our last show, but the show prior to this one, about how easily culture comes and how culture goes, and that I think Tony brought it up, that it is the leader's job to initiate the culture, but sometimes, like in my case, as an employee, I cultivate my own culture, and then people around me will have no choice but to be in my own culture, in the culture that I created myself. So how do you feel the culture is, like, I guess, for your employees, I guess currently? Like, do you feel like they're the ones that bring it? Do you feel like you started it and they're the ones carrying it, or?
You know, that's actually a great question, and then we're really in an interesting sort of spot with culture in our company, because we're a company that started with me, and we've grown to over 50. And 2 years ago in May, we had 8 employees, and we have 50 employees now.
That's
so
crazy.
we've done this really fantastic growth, and it's been very organic, and it's been very wonderful. But in that process, when it was 8 people, it was very easy for me to kind of show people my heartbeat, show people that culture. And then as we grew, I expected that to just happen naturally, and it doesn't. The bigger a company gets, the harder the leaders have to work at disseminating the culture and helping people to understand it and keeping a pulse on the culture. So, you know, I've kind of backtracked now, and we're starting to really have these like leadership team meetings, which are really like, let's talk about our culture. We're not talking about our science. We're not talking about time cards. We're not talking about like the nuts and bolts of our business. We're talking about what is our culture. And a lot of that is very vulnerable for me, because that's me opening up and saying, hey, these are my values. This is what matters to me. This is why we did this. Let me talk to you about my son and when he was diagnosed and what that was like for me. Because I need people to connect to that culture. And the only way to do that is to talk about it and to share about it, and to, get a common bond of culture, and to give that to my leaders, so that then the leaders can give that to the people that they touch.
So keeping on that topic, let's go with how important is it that your employees are happy?
Well, happiness is a strange word to me, because we all want happiness, but happiness is very temporal, it's very fleeting, it's completely dependent upon the situation, the environment, and we don't have any control over that.
It is an emotional output.
It is an emotional output. So I'm going to say, without being heartless at all, I don't really worry about whether or not employees are happy.
That was a trick question I put in there, actually.
Okay, well, I'm glad I didn't fall for it. I care very much, though, that people are satisfied, and that's a very different thing. I want their work to resonate with their core values. I want them to connect to it. I want it to provide them with purpose, so that they feel internally satisfied, that internal motivation that keeps people going. That connection to purpose is what makes it possible to do a job when it's not easy. I don't come to work every day happy. Happy is something that comes and goes. But purpose and that connection and that satisfaction and that belief that when I do my job, it has a purpose, and when I do it well, I feel good about it. That's my goal for my employees.
This is the really sexist side of me, is I feel like I am like a feminist almost, just because to me, women kind of get lost in the workplace. You always hear about men doing stuff, and for me, it's a woman can do exactly the same thing I can. There's no difference. So let's go to being a mother and a successful businesswoman. How do you split your time? How do you split being such a successful businesswoman and being a mother at the same time? Not to mention you have kids with autism at home too, which is bananas to me. I don't know how you do all of this.
So I don't think that there's a working mother anywhere that feels like they're splitting their time well. I think every time you ask that, a woman is always going to go, and probably a dad too. I think it's just working parents in general, where you just have that mom guilt. You're just going to feel guilty about not being able to be there 100% of the time. I think that's always there. I think I have to kind of say first and foremost, I have a terrific support system. My parents are involved. They help with the kids. Their dad is present and supportive and available. My kids are rock stars. They're flexible. They're independent. They're encouraging. I know that I could not do this well at the pace that I do it at without the support of those people, of that teamwork. There's kind of this great analogy about juggling balls that's necessary for a working parent. And I'm going to say working parent, not just working mom, but I do think moms kind of bear a heavier burden, but we'll just go with working parents. So you've got your work ball to juggle, and you've got your family ball to juggle, and you've got your self-care ball to juggle, and you've got your home ball, and you've got your friend ball, and there's all these balls in the air, and you have to design your life with enough margin so that when you drop a ball, it bounces, and you can pick it back up when you have time, and it doesn't break. So there can't be any part of your life that's so fragile that if you drop it, because you will, you can't not drop it. If you're juggling all these things, something is going to get dropped. Something is going to have a minute where you can't give it all your attention. But if it's not fragile, then you pick it back up and you start juggling it again. So I do that by tending to each part of my life diligently. When I'm focusing on my kids, I focus on my kids. When I'm focusing on my business, I focus on my business. But I also trust that I don't have to give everything to keep those things thriving.
So you mentioned the culture and your employee base. A big question I have would be the hiring process. Do you handle that? Do we have somebody that handles that? Your internal leadership? How do you go about hiring?
I do all the hiring. I think no matter how big we get, I think it's a part of the process that I don't ever want to let go of. I consider it my job, really kind of I don't want to say my only job because I have a ton of jobs, but I feel like it is one of my most important jobs to identify talented people and provide them a place to use their talents and then empower them to use their talents well. So the hiring process is something that I hold pretty closely because I want to choose those people that are going to meet our core values and that are going to do that with excellence. So our hiring process is actually a series of interviews, but before any interview, we have a process that applicants have to read written instructions and follow them very carefully. We have so many people who never make it to that kind of second interview.
Yeah, that would be me.
Yeah, because they're not carefully reading the instructions. And so we have I would say probably 20 applications a week to go through, and we're hiring constantly. And so that process of can you read these written instructions and follow them matters to our hiring process.
My ADHD would totally take over, and I would read it and then totally forget exactly what I read. Yeah, that goes in one ear and out the other. Yeah. I'm sure that can be behaviored out of me, probably.
It probably could.
Good, yeah. You should talk to somebody about that. You seem very busy. There's been a lot of stuff going on. What drives you? What keeps you going?
I think I have an innate sense of drive. I've always been an achiever, probably an overachiever. That's something that's always been true for me, and it's really just a part of who I am. It's how I was made. Being able to kind of share that drive with other people and serve others is what motivates me to keep going. I feel a sense of purpose in being able to be very driven and then use my abilities to serve others.
That's like the most motivating thing for me too, is if I feel like I'm like the easiest person to motivate. You know those like signs on like a gym wall, this is like you can do it.
Right.
I'm the guy that reads, I'm like, you know what, I can do it. You're right, sign. I can totally do it. So if I have a supervisor or a manager or a boss and they're really driven, like it gets me pumped up. Although that's a great answer. How do you handle an employee that isn't up to your standards? If you, let's say, maybe before the hiring process and maybe after the hiring process?
So the first thing for me is really to kind of take a step back and make sure I understand the problem fully and really kind of look at it from all the angles. And I ask a lot of questions. So what is it that isn't up to standards? Is it a problem in all the settings, or is it a problem in certain settings? Is it a problem with everyone they interact with, or just certain people that they interact with? Is it because I haven't done a good enough job? They need more training. They need more explanation. They need more sharing about why they do that part of the job and what the core purpose of that job is. Always like to check and see if there's something about me or the environment that we can change to help the employee to meet those standards. And then the second for that is I like to think about what skills we can build, model, demonstrate, show to employees that will help them with whatever they're struggling with. You know, we have this saying in behavior that we're always behaving. So if you're not doing something, if you're doing nothing, you're never doing nothing. You're always doing something. And so we don't want to tell people to just stop doing that, but we want to tell them to start doing this. And so I want to find a way to build in the skill that's missing and identify the skill so that they could do their job well. I want them to be growing, constantly becoming better as people, and helping them to find a skill set that is valuable, that will help eliminate that struggle.
Because you feel like you're constantly growing as well, right?
Absolutely.
You're constantly learning. I think that's a part that most leadership are lacking, actually, is that they might be stuck in their ways and they don't ever, them themselves never grow as well. So I love that answer too. All right, my question here is, how is it being a woman and being successful in a man's world?
I feel like I should have a really great answer for this because this is a huge topic. Gender parity in business is so important. I don't feel like I have a really interesting answer for this because I don't work in a traditional environment. I think if I did, I would probably struggle the way that women tend to in a male-dominated workplace. But because I own my business, I have more control over the culture, so it's less struggle overall. But it's an interesting thing to talk about because there's this really cool thing to understand about what's happening for women in business right now. So we talk about the glass ceiling, and we understand that there's a glass ceiling, but really it's looking like maybe there's a glass ceiling, but really there's more of a missing rung for women rather than a glass ceiling. So women have a harder time climbing into leadership positions because of gender bias, and because of some of the struggles that they have with being a mother and just the inherent needing to take time off to have children and that kind of thing. So this is an interesting concept because what we know from research is that women get more bachelor's degrees than men, and there are more women in the workplace than men. But women make up about only 20% of leadership in business. So there's definitely a disparity between men and women in leadership positions particularly. So what women are starting to do, myself included, is that they opt to work for themselves, or they opt to work for startup companies, or they opt to work for nonprofits where there's less gender bias, and they're more likely to find a mentor that's also female, so that they can have someone to kind of guide them.
That's really cool. Actually, at GM, I work in a factory, and you'd figure there'd probably be just a whole bunch of dudes, right? Actually, they do a really good job of putting women in leadership roles, and actually some of my favorite group leaders are women, just because I feel like women are more meticulous than men are. They are a lot easier to, I guess they do more mundane tasks easier. I used to work with I had a partner that was a girl, and there would be just like a really detailed job, and I'm like, hey, no, I'm not gonna be able to do this. Can you do this? Right. And it was it almost kind of sounded bad actually, but it's just, I feel like it's one of those things where, it's just, she was so much better at certain things, and it was, I just get asked a lot of time, like, you're gonna let her do that? I'm like, dude, yeah, like, she might be picking something up that's really heavy or underneath the truck or doing something. I'm like, well, she's way better at it than me, so she's gonna do it. And that was just, we did a really good job about just, I have a coined phrase that I like to say, is fill in where you fit in, no matter what your role might be. For me, I feel like I'm a leader at work. For me, if you're better at something, then you get to do it, especially if it's if time is not on our side or what it might be. I'm always willing to pass my role off to somebody, whether they're a male or female. It doesn't really matter to me, as long as the job gets done correctly. That should be the most important part. It shouldn't matter if you have a wiener or not. It shouldn't really matter. So what advice would you give someone who wants their own business or to be an effective leader?
That's a hard question, actually.
That is a hard question. That is a really hard question.
I think that the best piece of advice that I could give for being an effective business owner or leader is to be in a place where you are comfortable with being wrong and failing. So if you examine yourself and you feel like admitting failure or admitting that you're wrong or admitting that you can do better feels uncomfortable, then being a really authentic leader is also going to be uncomfortable. To really kind of thrive as a leader, you have to feel sure enough about yourself and your value that it doesn't completely shake you if you're wrong or if you fail. I think that's something that we kind of all have to work on constantly. We have to be in a spot where our self-worth and how we see ourselves in the world is sturdy enough that it isn't shaken by us being wrong. If that kind of concept is built on a strong enough foundation that you can mess up and then pick yourself up and you can keep moving forward, I think that is the most powerful tool for leadership.
I could not agree with you more, actually. The leadership is something that I'm very passionate about. It's almost like a weird side hobby that I have. Only in professional sports are you graded by how many wins you have. In the real world, in regular life, you fail way more than you actually succeed. And I feel like you grow from failure so much more than you do from winning. And we talked about this before. It's and like I said, professional sports you get graded by your wins. In real life you get graded by how you fail. It's how good you are at gracefully falling and failing. So I know Tony's gonna love that one. That's gonna be a big one that he's gonna probably bring up. Are you a Cowboys fan by chance?
I am a big Cowboys fan.
What about Rangers?
I'm a big Rangers
Mavericks?
fan. Yep, like the Mavericks.
Dallas Stars,
Absolutely.
they just won. Okay,
they did
okay,
just
good.
win. They played great.
Okay, yeah.
And I love it when Vegas loses because they don't deserve anything. So it was an awesome win.
So I should say football is big in all of our lives. I feel like we are in Texas after all. So, how do you feel about Dak Prescott? Do you follow football really close? Do you just because I would say I'm a casual fan of the Rangers, I hate to say it, but of the Stars, because baseball and hockey, they're not the most entertaining things to watch.
Right.
I should also mention FC Dallas. I'm a big fan of FC Dallas. But we talked about in our last show about Dak Prescott.
Mm-hmm.
He did not sign an extension with the Cowboys,
right.
But we learned that it was because the TV deal in the NFL resets.
Okay.
So they get a portion of that money. So he, just like a bunch of other big quarterbacks, signed their contracts to a particular year, which would be this one.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are Dak haters. Do you think that Dak is going to be worth the money or not worth the money?
Well, let's back up a little bit and talk just about football in general. So let me just get clear the air football-wise. Bill Belichick is a genius, but he's also evil. Same with Nick Saban. He's an evil genius. Notre Dame is also awful no matter what.
Yep, I 100% agree.
And blue football fields are stupid and should be banned.
Sorry, Boise State. So it's funny that you said that about Bill Belichick, because I have a theory here.
Okay.
I think, and I don't know which one is which, but I think that Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, one of them are the Antichrist, and one of them is Satan himself.
Okay.
I don't know which one is which. So we'll find out
We'll
this
find
year.
out this year. We'll see what happens with the Bucks.
Tom Brady is not that good. I'm just going to say it. He has regular arm strength. He has regular reads. He has regular quickness, the ball out of his hand. So I don't think he's that good, but we'll see. If the Patriots somehow get to the Super Bowl again, it's Belichick.
It's Belichick all the way.
Okay.
Right.
We're in agreement.
Right. Yeah, we're in agreement. Yeah, we're going to see. Now, I kind of put Belichick and Brady as like the dynamic duo of evil.
Okay.
Prior to the Super Bowl with the Atlantic Falcons. when Tom Brady came back. And then I had to have a complete 180 about Tom Brady, and I've been in a whole different place. So I'm a huge Bucks fan this year, just because I want to see what happens with Tom Brady. Is he the greatest of all time? Or is he just average, like you said? And we'll see. We'll see. Was it all Belichick? Was it what Belichick put on the field and Tom Brady just capitalized on that? Or is it really Brady? We'll get to see. It's a great control.
I love it.
So I'll answer your question about Dak, because that's really what you asked me. I think that he can be worth the money. I think that he needs the right kind of leadership. I think that he is still growing as a person and a professional. And I think that so much of that is going to kind of be played out on the field for him. And it's just going to be determined on what happens for him from a leadership perspective.
I love it. Because I think Dak Prescott, and this is an ugly word for quarterbacks, but I think he's a system quarterback. But let's not forget, Joe Montana was also a system quarterback. I think that he's not the type of guy that's just going to throw the ball in the air and hope someone catches it, Tony Romo. I think he's the GOAT, by the way. But I think Dak, you have to be open and he'll throw it, which unfortunately I'm too short to be a quarterback in the NFL. I also throw like a girl. So that's also the reason why I'm not in the NFL right now is, but I have the brain for a quarterback, so I think I would play similar to Dak. If you're not open, I'm not throwing it. I like that he doesn't make a lot of mistakes.
Right.
I think he's the right quarterback in this era of football. I think he's the right quarterback. So, okay, and that's it. We're going to end it right here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
At the Business and Beyond podcast, you know we love to promote small businesses. It's what we do. One of those small businesses we support is Sense in the City. As a small Waco, Texas-based company, Sense in the City offers handcrafted candles, room sprays, wax melts, and car fresheners in a variety of scents. And don't worry, guys, they have scents for us too. We have a bourbon wax melt burning in the studio right now. To place your order, go to their website at senseinthecity.com and follow them on Facebook and Instagram at Sense in the City. All of this information will be in the description box below. And be sure to mention you heard about them from the Business and Beyond podcast.
Finding the sports equipment you need for the price you want to pay is difficult. You go to Academy and pay the big box store price, and Walmart doesn't have the selection you're looking for. Let me offer you an alternative, Rhino Sports. They give you great prices because they are 100% online. No storefront means low cost, which means savings are passed on directly to the consumer. Rhino Sports is a local Johnson County company, and selection goes way beyond what's featured on the website. Just go to rhinosportstexas.com to see what they have to offer. Again, that's rhinosportstexas.com. If what you are looking for isn't featured on their website, feel free to send them a message at their website or check them out on Facebook at RhinoSportsTX. Again, on Facebook at RhinoSportsTX.